Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is episode 7 of the custom pizza truck build, and if you are looking at this engine and wondering how did it all get put together, well, shame on you. You should have watched my other episode where I built this 454 Big Block. I did a standalone episode because I wanted to be helpful for anybody online who was looking to put their 454 together, and I couldn't find any good videos that currently existed on YouTube. So you can go and check that out. I'll put a link to that in the description. Otherwise, let's jump right into getting this into the truck. Yeah. That's it. Let's go. Alright, so I lost about 1 psi over 5 minutes, and you can see I do have just a little bit of a coolant leak right there, and it looks like I had upper radiator hose leak. So I went ahead and tightened that down. I didn't have any more pressure drop, but I'll run another test just to make sure. Alright guys, it's the moment of truth. ready to fire up the 454. Now, because this is a complete rebuild, the engine startup process is just that, a process. Let me explain to you what I'll be doing. First things first, I went through the entire engine bay and made sure that everything is connected as it should be, and then I double checked our fluids. Transmission looks good, oil level looks good, coolant level looks good. I did make sure to pressure test the entire cooling system for 15 minutes at 15 psi after I retightened that upper hose clamp, and we are good to go. No leaks there. Now, before I can actually fire this up, I do want to crank over the engine and make sure that we're getting adequate oil pressure so that it doesn't start dry. And I'm accomplishing that by leaving the fuel pump unhooked, and then I'll crank it over in 5-second bursts, and you do the 5 seconds to not overheat the starter. So it's crank, 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 crank for 5 seconds, watching our mechanical oil pressure gauge. Once we reach 50 psi there, we know that the engine is properly lubed up. I'll come back out here, we'll hook up our fuel pump, and then I'll turn the key to the on position, which will prime the fuel pump for 3 seconds, and then I'll come over here and make sure that we don't have any fuel leaks on our fuel rail. As long as we don't have any fuel leaks, I'll hop back in the truck and then fire it up. As long as it's running, I'll hop back out here, make sure that we don't have any fluid leaks of any kind, and then I will pull the cap off of the radiator to make sure that we don't have any air trapped in the system, and then we'll watch that coolant level rise as it heats up. Once we get to the top and all the air is gone, I'll put that cap back on, and then I'll get this garage door opened up so that we can pull the truck outside. So once we get it outside, I'll spend the next 30 minutes increasing and decreasing our engine RPM, which will increase the vacuum in the intake, which will allow a little bit more oil to sneak up into those piston rings to help them seat faster. Once we're at full operating temperature, I'll drive it around our property just a little bit, make sure there's no unusual sounds or issues there. Then we'll park it, stop it, wait for it to fully cool down, and then we'll double check for any leaks or cross contaminations. And as long as we're good there, it passed the first test. So let's get started. All right, I've got my computer all hooked up and we are ready to go. I will tell you, this is not my favorite part of building an engine. I do not like doing the first starts. I like watching first starts online, but the problem is there's 1,000 things that can go wrong and there's only one thing that can go right. So we are hoping that we are that one thing. All right, let's go ahead and crank it over. We'll make sure that we're getting RPM reading here, and then we'll make sure we're getting oil pressure there. Here we go. All right, so far so good. Reading engine RPM. Coolant temperature looks correct. Ah, there's our oil pressure. Let me show you the oil pressure. Almost there. All right, well, we're close enough. We're at a little over 40. Let's get this fuel pump hooked up and get this thing started. All right, get this plugged in. All right, let's go. All right, let's listen for the fuel pump. Oh, it's definitely priming. All right, let me see if I can get a shot at the fuel rail down there. All right, looking good. No fuel leaks down there. I guess that's it. Ready to start this thing up. All right, the door is cracked open. Fan is on. Oil pressure's good. Telling me to check gauges because it's not registering any oil pressure. Engine speed 1,000. Let's see how we're looking out here. Oil pressure is rock solid. No fluid. Might need to add some coolant there. All right, coolant level's starting to rise, so we'll close that up. Everything is looking good in here. We are right at 50 psi. Let's see if it goes into gear. Ah, looking good. All right, let's get that door open and get this thing outside. All right, so far so good. All right, we got a little bit of smoke on the exhaust manifolds, totally normal. The engine block was painted, so were the heads. So we're gonna have a little bit of that paint burning off. And sometimes the exhaust manifold gaskets will create a little bit of smoke, but otherwise we're looking good. Still no fluid loss. Let's make sure that we're all up to pressure here. Oh, yep, good. Double check our oil pressure. Oh wow, we are just right there at 50. All right, we're at 167 degrees of engine temperature. Everything's looking good. We're almost up to full operating temp. Oil pressure is still at 50. Everything is looking spot on. I think I should drive around in some loops here. Let's make sure there's no fluid loss. All right. Good oil pressure, good temperature. The steering is nice. No issues, doesn't seem like there's any air bubbles in the system. (183 degrees. Oil pressure is starting to slowly drop. We are at about 42, give or take. Looks like the alternator's working. We're at 14 volts. No check engine lights, no warning lights. All right, well, everything is testing perfect. Oil pressure good. The coolant temperature has gotten up to about 183 and it's staying right there. So I don't think we're gonna get any higher, and it's been there for about 10 minutes or so. So I'll go ahead and shut it down and check the fluids. Fingers crossed. Nice, they're looking good there. Let's check our power steering fluid. That's a little low. All right, guys, it's the next day, and I have to say, The first test was a total success. We have no leaks, no issues, no reason to believe that anything at all is wrong with this engine, so I am very happy with that. The next step is putting 500 miles on this and then sending the oil out for analysis to Blackstone Labs. Now, the guy who built this engine, he said it's not worth sending out the first sample because it's going to come back with just tons of metals. It's going to have high zinc from the engine assembly lube. It's probably going to have a little bit of lead from the bearing wearing, that kind of thing. But this would be my first chance to actually send out an oil analysis on a 500-mile complete rebuild of an engine. So I would like to have it just personally so that I've got like a nice little baseline for the future. So that's going to be it for this episode because this is all running and driving and functional again. But I wanted to show you a sneak peek of a few things we've got coming up in the next episode. So let me show you. So I've got my little tube roller all set up here with my 1/2-inch square dies, and I'm going to be using that to build some custom brackets for the service window. And then in the rear over here, if you remember, I cut off the rear frame with just a plasma cutter, but I have already gotten some taillights hooked up to it. So I'll show you guys how I did that, and then also building a custom bumper for this in the next episode. So thanks for making it this far. See you guys next week.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Bye-bye.